Jack. All right, so I am delighted to be here and join with you here in Cape Cod. Can you hear me okay? Is this working? I don't feel like standing up on the stage, if that's all right. I'm tall enough as it is, I think. So, but Madeline and I have been traveling now to Unity churches for about 25 years, I would say, full-time, and I think it's always helpful to remember in a service that we're, as you mentioned actually, Tony, we're part of a much larger movement. And I think in a lot of ways it's one of the healthiest movements in our society in the sense that Unity is a movement that's based on radical inclusion, an idea that we include everyone, not only welcome everyone, but also that we include the spiritual teachings of the world, essentially, that we don't say, no, that's not part of our tradition and so forth. That Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, the co-founders of Unity, found themselves being very much enriched not only by the teachings of Jesus and the Bible, teachings as well, but also the teachings of Buddhism and Taoism and these ancient spiritual traditions from Asia. And I think they were actually pretty strongly influenced by Emerson, actually. And I was born and raised in Concord, Massachusetts, so I have kind of a special bias towards Emerson and Thoreau and Alcott. And the sense that they were bringing in a lot of the teachings from these ancient traditions that really, I think, help us to deepen our understanding of spirituality. So, as we heard earlier, Madeline and I will be giving a workshop this afternoon on developing intuition. And I think, I just want to say a few words about that. You know, music in many ways and art are languages of intuition. And I think our language can also be, words can be a language of intuition if we're able to open and listen. But the basic idea, I think intuition is essentially, in many ways, the key component to spirituality. In other words, when we look at our lives and we think about what we're doing, right, and how we're living, I think it becomes pretty obvious that we're all propelled through our lives by our thoughts and our feelings. And I think it becomes pretty obvious also that we are, from the time we're little infants, bombarded by influences that are basically the result of our society, our cultural upbringing. So the thoughts of my parents and teachers and ministers and the Walmart ads on television, you know, all these things, we're constantly, from the time we're little infants, receiving all this input, and it goes inside of us, and we're like little sponges as children, and we soak it all up. And so in many ways, we're being propelled by the programming of our society. And as long as we're being propelled by the programming of our society and by the rational thoughts and so forth that come out of that, and very often irrational thoughts that come out of all that, we're not, I don't think, living a spiritual life. We may be going to church every day because that's what we learn to do and so forth, but we're essentially being propelled. And what intuition is from my understanding, is a completely different foundation for action and understanding. It's actually connecting with our true nature. And so we find for example, in the scriptures, that Jesus at one point sort of epitomizes the teachings and says, essentially, it's all about two things, loving God and loving our neighbor. And we sound, we have all kinds of disagreements about what loving God actually means. But I think, as we just heard in that song, but I think the basic idea is that it's connecting authentically with the transpersonal dimension of consciousness, something beyond our personality and what we know and what we think and our collection, our programming, essentially. And this is a key thing, because when we are able to do that, I think this is why, in a sense, it's important to do practices, why it's important to meditate, for example. How many of you meditate or do some kind of spiritual practice regularly, like every day? Anybody? Good. Most of you, I hope. This is really important and very helpful because I think taking time in our daily life to bring our attention back into this moment and experience ourselves not as merely an actor doing and reacting to life, but actually connecting with the consciousness that is the source of what we are, creates space in our life, creates the opportunity for us to understand more deeply the nature of our consciousness and the nature of mind. You know, we have this sense, I think, that we're a thing, right? That we were born and we will die. And this is the cultural program, which is very powerful, that we are objects, that we're born and will die, and basically and we learn to see each other that way as things. And in Sanskrit, it's called nama rupa. That means name and form. We identify with the name and the form. That's me. We hear our name. Oh yeah, that's me. There's an old Zen saying, "He who answers when called is nothing but a thief." What's that mean? Essentially, that identification with a concrete, fundamentally separate self, or me, Will Tuttle, or whatever our name is, in a sense, steals away from us our direct connection with the reality that we truly are. There's another old metaphor that I love from the Buddhist tradition, which is that if we go to a beach and we see some footprints in the sand, we don't go up to the footprints in the sand and say, "Well, good morning, George. How are you this morning?" Right? "You're looking a little sandy and shallow this morning." We see that footprint is made by a being, but the footprint is not the being that made the footprint, right? And it's the same thing. When you see me waving, this is a footprint waving. You cannot see the being that's responsible. We all have this body, mind, sort of concoction that we operate through, and we're programmed to identify with this, that this was born and will die, and we are the one. This is us. It's like the vehicle. And so the spiritual teachers from all the traditions agree, essentially, that this is a delusion. And as long as we identify with this delusion, we're in what is called samsara. Samsara means suffering that never ends. And what that means, though, the good news is that it does end. It never ends in the sense as long as we are misidentified as the object. And so the idea is to question everything. Question the official stories in our society. These official stories of who's superior and who's inferior and what our food is and what we should do and all these things, because those are in many ways hooks that imprison us into a system that is not in our best interest. And so once we begin to question the underlying attitudes, we can actually begin to connect with our intuition. And this is what I think Jesus and the Buddha and all the great spiritual teachers were emphasizing in spiritual practice, to somehow soften the armor of the ego, this fundamentally separate self, and connect with what we are as eternal consciousness that was never born and will never die. Our mind is like the sky. The sky itself is free. No clouds, no chemtrails, whatever it is. Nothing can actually fundamentally stain the sky itself. It's beyond all that. And we tend, I think, to forget that that's who we truly are. Our mind is of the nature of the sky. We tend to identify with the various clouds that come along, and that's us. and that's where we sort of identify. And so that's why I think meditation is so helpful, in the sense that we can take time to reconnect with the deeper awareness and get a glimpse of the truth that actually true nature is unconditioned and free, and of the nature of love and awareness and kindness, because we see it from that perspective that all other manifestations, all other human beings, animals, this beautiful earth is also a manifestation of the same consciousness. And so we feel a sense of kinship, a sense of connectedness, the idea that I will somehow manipulate this other person to get what I want. It's like this finger saying, "I'm going to manipulate you to get what I want." It's like, it's ridiculous. We're all here. I mean, if my fingers were competing with each other when I'm trying to play the piano, I wouldn't get too far. Right? If they were judging each other, like, you stupid finger, get out of the way. The idea is the fingers are all serving a higher purpose. And we're like fingers on the same hand, essentially, as human beings. But we've lost our way. We've been born into a society with a very toxic program. It's really, you have to understand, it's toxic. It's about competition, judgment, blame, shame, and abuse. And it comes in on every level from the time we're little infants. And so what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore and what the great spiritual teachers are doing is showing us another way of living based on the truth that there's one life living through all of us, and that we are eternal consciousness, essentially. And when we begin to understand that, we can begin to create communities that reflect that. And I think there's no greater gift we can give to the world than to come here to do that. And I remember when I was a kid growing up in Concord, it was kind of a neat place to grow up, because there was just, there was April 19th, Patriots Day. My father would get on his Minuteman outfit every year and get the gun off the wall and go down to the Old North Bridge in Concord. We would reenact the battle and send the British back to Boston and celebrate the Revolution. But I think that's a healthy thing. The idea that if things aren't going the way we want them to, we should have a change, right? But also, the Transcendentalists in the 1800s, as I already mentioned, they were the first ones to really bring the teachings of Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism, Vedanta, and so forth into our society, into the West, into the United States. Thoreau had the largest library of these books, actually, in the whole North America back in the 1840s. And they were bringing in these ideas that are very healing, very healthy, like God is mind from the Buddhist tradition, infinite mind, or God is infinite principle from the Taoist tradition, that we can actually understand how it functions, how this infinite principle functions. It's not personal. Or this idea from the Hindu tradition that God is equally female as male. Wow, that's quite a thought, right? So these ideas came in, and they were really setting people free. Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, these people. And so I remember myself when I went away to college, Colby College in Maine, I started to read some of these writings, and there was one book that kind of epitomized everything in a very beautiful way at that time. It was a book written, again, back in the 1890s by a guy named Richard Buck, who wrote a book called Cosmic Consciousness. And he basically said in this book that virtually everyone is at the level of what he referred to as self-consciousness. That's basically this level where I'm concerned about myself. And it's basically where we're all at. But he said that there are certain very powerful people who had attained what he referred to as cosmic consciousness. People, both men and women, with sages and saints and mystics and founders of religions throughout the ages. And he said they had managed to basically make a qualitative leap and get out of the prison, essentially, of self-consciousness, and discovered the loss of fear, the loss of the fear of death. They began to live their lives to bless the world and to be kind and loving to others and to be caring, and there was a moral elevation that naturally occurred and an intellectual illumination that also naturally occurred. And he said that these great people, the idea I loved really was that he said that it is the destiny of all human beings. This is our purpose. Our destiny is to attain cosmic consciousness. We're here on this planet to learn how to do that and to grow in our capacities so that we attain cosmic consciousness. So I remember going home and, back to Concord on the breaks from college toward my junior and senior year and talking to my parents and saying, Dad, we're here to attain cosmic consciousness, right? And you know that, right? And he was like, listen, I'm spending a lot of money on this education for you, and I'm not sure how that's going to help you get ahead in this world. You got to get ahead in the world. You got to get ahead. You're supposed to get ahead. And so, so anyway, but I really, yes, that's right. That's it. That's right. And so he and I started plotting. We started thinking, okay, we are going to attain cosmic consciousness. That's what we want to do. And I remember as soon as I graduated from Colby, we were working on the idea, how could we do this? And we thought about it, and we got, what do we actually do now? Okay, what do we do? And then we came up with a perfect plan. We knew what to do. If you want to attain cosmic consciousness, you do one thing. You go to California. I knew that would work. So it was 1975, right? Things were happening in San Francisco. We knew cosmic consciousness was definitely there. So we headed west. I remember walking down the driveway with a little backpack with some fresh baked cookies from my mother, and we talked to my father owned this whole chain of newspapers, and I told him we're going to do that, and he was like, actually, bless his heart, he said, every man must march to the beat of the drum that he hears. He actually quoted Thoreau, which I thought was really touching my heart when he did that. But anyway, so we marched off. And I remember after about a month and a half, we'd gotten as far as Buffalo. And it was already freezing. It was October. And I remember thinking, well, I've got a degree from this good school. It's October, it's Buffalo. I think we better head south. So we walked south, and we basically walked about maybe 20 miles a day for the next 4 months. Down through upstate New York, Pennsylvania, across Pennsylvania to West Virginia. We got into the Bible Belt. I didn't know what that meant. I found out. That means they try to save you every night. It was really very intense. Anyway, we worked our way across West Virginia to Kentucky. It got worse as we went farther south, and then into Tennessee. And we ended up eventually in Tennessee, we found a community called The Farm. And The Farm in 1975 was the largest hippie commune in the world, and they were mostly from California. So there were about 1,000 people living there at that point. And that was really interesting. But we actually ended up eventually continuing farther south. We walked all the way to Alabama to a Zen center in Huntsville. You probably think I'm lying, but there was a Zen center in Alabama at that point. And eventually did get out to San Francisco a couple of years later, and eventually went to Korea and shaved my head, became a Zen monk, and eventually came back and taught college and got my PhD, and eventually met Madeline in Switzerland, and then we decided to travel to Unity churches, and we've been doing that now for the last 25 years. Because I really feel that Unity actually is a manifestation of a very pure. How many of you have been to Unity Village? Some of you, if you can, try to get there once before you die, like Mecca. Try to get there once before you die. It's a very beautiful place, and I really feel you see the manifestation of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore's vision of harmony, of prayer as a way of healing, of learning to see not just things, but see beings. When we see beings rather than things, when we see the actual being beyond just the outer manifestation, the actual being, we become healers. That's how we actually heal others and ourselves, by getting beyond that. So for us, for the last 25 years, it's been a real honor to be able to travel and be part of this movement. And I think it's a movement that's based in many ways on what the Buddha taught towards his death. He said, there's these the three jewels are talked about in Buddhism. The three jewels are like the essential, most important things. One is the Buddha. Buddha means basically your true nature, like we would say in Unity, our inner Christ nature, the essentially liberated, wise capacity of our intuition that knows the truth that we are. The Dharma is the second jewel. That's the teachings that help us to awaken the Buddha nature within us. And the third jewel is the Sangha. And the Sangha is the community of people who are interested in and dedicated to propagating the Dharma and awakening the Buddha, right? In other words, the community of spiritual aspirants that are working to realize our true nature and to live that. And he said, without the Sangha, there will never be any Buddha or any Dharma. And I think it's very important to understand how important it is to two things, really. One is to do the inner work that helps us to actually realize our true nature, and the other is to do the outer work of supporting each other on the path, and to create communities of sanity, communities of kindness, of caring, of sustainability, of inclusiveness, of love, essentially. That without creating communities of love, in every generation, the teachings will be lost. It's really up to us in this generation to help bring this message, and the only way we can bring it is to live it, to actually do the inner work, to actually live this. And I think when we do, we connect with the most precious thing, which is the inner joy that is our true nature. So I'll just close with that idea. The basic idea, I remember when I was on that walk with my brother, and we had no reason to be happy, really. I mean, if you look at what was going on, we had nothing. I mean, the little bit that we had, we got rid of it, because if you have to carry it after a while, it's like, well, I don't think I need that extra pair of shoes. I don't need that extra pair of pants. I don't need this. I carry it around. So we pretty much had nothing. and yet I remember, and we were definitely not doing what we were supposed to do. We were not following what my parents or my teachers or anything. We had no security, all of that, right? But I remember for the first time in my life, since I was probably maybe a little infant, I started feeling these waves of joy just washing over me. And they had no reason in the outer world. I think that's our true nature. When we connect with our intuition, and our intuition is essentially the greatest gift our intuition gives us. It's the inner guidance system that helps us to live our life, our unique life. And when we do that, we naturally have a sense of happiness, a sense of gratitude, a sense of joy, because we're living our life. It doesn't mean that suddenly our lives are totally without any problems and are easy. We may have problems and challenges, but we're living our life, and there's a sense of just the great opportunity that is. And so I think when we're living our life and we're connecting with our intuition, we have this sense of joy, then we create around us a field, without even trying, that naturally encourages others to do the same thing. And when we have a whole community of people who are doing that, who are working on developing our connection with our intuition, with our inner wisdom, which is the feminine capacity to be receptive to a higher knowing, and we're working on that, and we're sharing techniques of doing that, and teachings, and encouraging that, then we're creating a field, again, of consciousness that's much larger than any of us individually, that can actually help to transform our human consciousness. And I think this is the most important thing we can do. We're all on this planet for a short time. It's important to understand that. We're here for a few decades, maybe 7, 8, 9 decades, maybe eat a lot of sprouts, maybe 10 decades, right? But you're here for a few decades. So they go by quickly. So every day is precious. Every day we can wake up and remember the truth that we have another day, a precious gift that we can help awaken and understand our true nature. We can contribute. We can be part of the healing of our world. We've come to this planet that's needs some help, right? And we're remembering, and now we're helping to contribute our unique gifts to attain a higher level of consciousness, cosmic consciousness, actually, move in that direction, and to bring that to this earth. It's really, I think in many ways, it's now or never. I mean, if we continue the way we're going, it's becoming really obvious that we can no longer, we won't have a world for our children. So it's an honor to be with you, to be part of this movement. I really give thanks for each and every one of you. I know if you found your way through the door and you're here right now, you're already on a path of questioning the official stories, of awakening, as Jesus said, our connection with the transpersonal dimension, with loving God, loving our neighbor. And we're all neighbors. All sentient beings are our neighbors. And when we understand that, we can really create a society with a new story, a story based on respect and kindness and compassion for all living beings. So much love to you all. Thanks so much for the efforts that you're making. And I really would like to maybe just close with a very short, very brief piece of music. And this is a piece, it's kind of mellow, but it's a piece that was inspired by a little mouse, where Madeline and I lived in Northern California at one point early on. We moved into this house. There were a lot of mice there, so I was transporting them across this little stream below the house and hoping they didn't just run back in. And anyway, one day I had a mouse in this large jar. We had these large jars, and I put her on. We had a grand piano in the living room, and I just played, and this little mouse sort of drew this melody out of me. So I'd like to share that with you now, and just invite all of us to perhaps reflect on and remember the beauty of this earth, of all living beings, of each other, of our loved ones, of animals, and of the abundance and beauty. I mean, being on Cape Cod is such a joy. There's so much beauty everywhere here. And to give thanks for the beauty and know that we can contribute to that we can learn to see it everywhere. This is the mouse song. Bless you all. Thank you. Much love. Much love to you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You have been watching the message from our Sunday celebration service here at Unity on Cape Cod, providing a positive path for spiritual living. Please join us every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. at 147 Walton Ave, Hyannis, Mass. And visit us online at www.unityoncapecod.org.